The year is 1910. We are time tripping. The Mexican Revolution. You must do a podcast.
Hello, Johnny.
Hello, Phil. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Welcome, Johnny, to your own garage, and welcome, listeners, to the only podcast where we travel year by year, event by event, back through the 20th century. And we've done 9 time trips. So in 1910, this week. And what else do we have to do each time, Johnny?
Have to bring back a little item looted from history. Or maybe liberated is a better word. Liberated from history, from that time period.
Copied, maybe it is, to avoid any victim of the past. But yeah, I'm quite excited, Johnny. Not least because we're having a little break up to the we're having a little break after today from the main timeline. Although there will be content coming out, of course. Anyway, God, I'm just so excited. And it's the Mexican Revolution.
It is indeed. It's our second revolution. In 10 years, we've taken in 2 revolutions. The first one just a couple of years ago.
At least.
1908, the Young Turk Revolution. Now we're off to Mexico.
We are off to 1910, and we're focusing today, aren't we, on the figure of a dictator who has been long in power, almost 30 years.
A chap called Porfirio Dias, who ruled Mexico as a strongman from 1876 to 1911.
But it's all about to end, and we're going to go first, Johnny. I'm very excited to say to an interview with this dictator by a little bit of a toadying journalist called James Creelman, and this interview is going to have big impact, eh?
Well, let's find out, shall we?
Oh yes, you're right. Let's get in the time machine.
Pile in.
Time travelers. Go.
We're here at the site of the interview. James Creelman interviewing the dictator in 1908.
Well, I think because of the nature of the revolution, we're actually going to be jumping around a little bit. Of course, the revolution really kicks off in 1910, but we should mention that this revolution lasts for a whole decade. It starts in 1910, but doesn't actually really finish until 1920. Some people even say it finished a little bit later. So, yeah, we will be jumping around a little bit. But yeah, let's start with this interview. Let's see what Mr. Creelman has to say when he comes face to face with our mustachioed dictator, Porfirio Dias.
Well, I was going to say quickly that usually we obviously broadcast this, as we're watching now, we're here at the palace. For copyright reasons, we can't bring our listeners the actual conversation, so we're going to have to reenact it, you and I, in audio while we watch the real thing happen because of our time machine. Do you follow?
I do. Whether anyone else will, that's a matter for them.
For the courts. A high, wide forehead that slopes up to crisp white hair and overhangs deep-set, dark brown eyes that search your soul, soften into an inexpressible kindliness, and then dart quick-side looks, terrible eyes, threatening eyes, loving, confiding, humorous eyes, a straight, powerful, broad, and somewhat fleshy nose whose curved nostrils lift and dilate with every emotion, huge, virile jaws that sweep from large, flat, fine ears set close to the head, to the tremendous, square, fighting chin. I should say, by the way, this is all verbatim of what he said about this dictator, and I'm not even finished. A wide, firm mouth shaded by a white moustache. A full, short, muscular neck. Wide shoulders. Deep chest. A curiously tense and rigid carriage that gives great distinction to a personality suggestive of singular power and dignity. That is Porfirio Dias in his 78th year. At a time when the American soul shudders at the mere thought of a third term for any president. So I think this is Teddy Roosevelt, who's about to be kicked out of office, and there's a bit of a worry that he'll run for a third term, which at that time wasn't actually unconstitutional, but there was a convention that you should only have two because that's what George Washington did. But this, of course, is being compared to Diaz's 30 years in power.
I think he kept saying that he was going to hold elections, free and fair elections, but then whenever they came around, he was just like, nah, surprise, we'll do it. We'll do it my way again, and hands down, I win. No contest.
You're playing the president himself, so... This too at a time when the American soul shudders at the mere thought of a third term for any president. So you, Johnny, that is, the president, surveyed the majestic sunlit scene below the ancient castle and turned away with a smile, brushing a curtain of scarlet trumpet flowers and vine-like pink geraniums as he moved along the terrace toward the inner garden, where a fountain set among palms and flowers sparkled with water from the spring at which Montezuma used to drink.
It is a mistake to suppose that the future of democracy in Mexico has been endangered by the long continuance in office of one president. I can say sincerely that office has not corrupted my political ideals, and that I believe democracy to be the one true just principle of government, although in practice it is possible only to highly developed peoples.
Because I think he's playing to the American audience, isn't he, in this, and being like, gosh, we couldn't possibly be as highly developed and democratic as you, USA. I think that the president's using really, he really lays it on thick in this interview to appeal to America.
I can lay down the presidency of Mexico without a pang of regret, but I cannot cease to serve the country while I live.
The sun shone full in the president's face, but his eyes did not shrink from the ordeal. The green landscape, the smoking city, the blue tumult of mountains, the thin, exhilarating scented air seemed to stir him, and the colour came to his cheeks as he clasped his hands behind him and threw his head backward. His nostrils opened wide. You know that in the United States we are troubled about the question of electing a president for 3 terms.
Yes, I know. It is a natural sentiment of democratic peoples that their officials should be often changed. I agree with that sentiment.
I love that, the way he... the natural sense... He's talking, in the language of, the kind of colonialists and the big powers. He's kind of, flattering them, I think.
And you got to remember that this is a guy that has ruled for 30 years, 30 plus years, and each time holding on to power through various bypasses of the Constitution and just sometimes outright crushing of opposition, jailing and murdering even to get his way at each upcoming election.
Key point of this interview is that in his desire to show to the American audience how sort of kind and democratic he now is, he basically says, I'd be very happy to have political opposition. And it is our revolutionaries to be, I think, who say, well, let's call his bluff on that, as it's there in writing.
Indeed. He does sort of shoot himself in the foot a little bit with this interview when he is almost so open and honest, inverted commas, with his thoughts that, I've been ruling for a while, I think maybe, we should encourage more democracy, and I'm willing to step down if the time comes. That's essentially the essence of this interview. But as you say, you do have the revolutionaries, these constitutionalists, who are put out by the fact that Mexico is a dictatorship, and they actually see this as a chance to do something about it. Do you want to do the next line from Creelman? Because I think that hits quite hard to Mr. Diaz, and then he really goes off on a big long speech.
Which one? It seemed
hard to realise.
It seemed hard to realise that I was listening to a soldier who had ruled a republic continuously for more than a quarter of a century with a personal authority unknown to most kings. I'm going into the accent now, Johnny. I can already hear you whetting your appetite for your best Diaz.
I'm not gonna do a Mexican accent.
No, I can't.
I promise I won't.
Yeah, we'll Death of Stalin it. So in our own accents. For more than a soldier who'd ruled a republic for more than a quarter of a century with a personal authority unknown to most kings, yet he spoke with a simple and convincing manner, as one whose place was great and secure beyond the need of hypocrisy.
It is quite true that when a man has occupied a powerful office for a very long time, he is likely to begin to look upon it as his personal property. And it is well that a free people should guard themselves against the tendencies of individual ambition. Yeah, this is where you can see the constitutionalists rubbing their hands. Hold on, we'll hold these words up to you in the mirror very soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although I got power at first from the army, an election was held as soon as possible, and then my authority came from the people. I've tried to leave the presidency several times, but it has been pressed upon me, and I remained in office for the sake of the nation which trusted me. This is again him almost saying that the people are begging him to stay in power, and that he needs to be there as a figurehead, which, yeah, probably isn't 100% truthful.
Strong and stable.
He goes on to say, I have waited patiently for the day when the people of the Mexican Republic would be prepared to choose and change their government at every election without danger of armed revolutions and without injury to the national credit or interference with national progress. I believe that day has come.
That's the killer line, isn't it? That the revolutionaries read and really use against him. Well, if you're waiting patiently for it,
here it is.
Here it is.
Indeed.
I really like what Diaz says next. I really like as well, because so far he's presented a really moderate figure, despite the ruthlessness of his methods. So go on, Diaz. Let's have it. Cameron D. Salvi D. Is it? And Destiny.
PD Diaz.
PD Diaz. Okay.
We began by making robbery punishable by death and compelling the execution of offenders within a few hours after they were caught and condemned. We ordered that wherever telegraph wires were cut and the chief officer of the district did not catch the criminal, he himself should suffer. And in case the cutting occurred on a plantation, the proprietor who failed to prevent it should be hanged to the nearest telegraph pole. These were military orders, remember. We were harsh. Sometimes we were harsh to the point of cruelty, but it was all necessary then to the life and progress of the nation. If there was cruelty, results have justified it.
The nostrils dilated and quivered. The mouth was a straight line.
It was better that a little blood should be shed, that much blood should be saved. The blood that was shed was bad blood. The blood that saved was good blood.
It's a ongoing theme with him that he's obsessed with this idea of good and bad blood, and if bad blood's shed, then more good blood can drip. Over the city drifted the smoke of many factories. It is better than cannon smoke, I said.
Yes, and yet there are times when cannon smoke is not such a bad thing. The toiling poor of my country have risen up to support me, but I cannot forget what my comrades in arms and their children have been to me in my severest ordeals.
There were actually tears in the veteran's eyes. Goodness me.
History repeats itself, History repeats itself, History repeats itself, History
We must remember that he did come to power through a bloody coup. But he was known for his Pax Porfiriana, which was a decades-long period of peace. Made possible, of course, as he is alluding to, only through brute force and his liberal use of the army and various other methods of repression, like the federales in the countryside, which he used to crush any dissent in the village amongst the peasantry. He's also complicit in a sort of ethnocide against some of the native Indian tribes in the area, especially the Yaqui people, and he's deporting them, enslaving them in the haciendas, and the whole system that he's built up around this time that he's in power is sort of fueled and lubricated by loads of new money that's being pumped into the economy, especially from America and Britain and France. And this is why he's sort of cozying up to this American journalist and reminding him of how he's sort of developed Mexico and how he's opened it up to the West and to foreign trade and investment, how he's thrown up railways everywhere. It was a big thing. The Sultan in Turkey also, it was his big thing to build railways. Like, railway building was massive at this time. If you're a dictator or a president, you better be building some railways to get the people on your side.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he does make Mexico wealthier than it's been before. He's opening up new mines, and by pushing all the peasants into submission really on the haciendas, he's enriching the few at the cost of the many. But exports are flourishing as a result. The cities are doing quite well. But all the time this is going on, this Pax Porfiriana, these decades of peace within Mexico, there's this undercurrent of resentment, because while the rich and the handful of powerful families that are monopolising these economic and political opportunities are doing very well, the vast majority of peasants and sharecroppers are really struggling. And even though they're exporting a lot of food, Mexico, they're not able to feed the peasants, because they're just concentrating on export crops, and the peasants are going hungry, and they're having to import the actual food that the peasants eat.
And of course, in the Young Turks case, they couldn't afford to pay the army, and then once you're not feeding or not paying, you've got trouble on your hands.
Yep, a surefire trouble. So yeah, he's grown the economy. He's cozied up to America. He's sort of turned Mexico into this oligarchy situation. But now he's also saying in this interview, I'm not such a bad guy. I'm going to open it. We're going to have an election in 1910. And this is where a chap called Francisco Maduro comes onto the scene. He's also from a wealthy family of industrialists and landowners, but he is a bit of a dreamer, someone who's a big fan of the Constitution and due processes in elections.
And if I may grab in on that, the Constitution, am I right, it's like, again, with the Young Turks, does it go back to like the 1860s? And a lot of the struggles since then have been, you're not upholding this Constitution, as it were. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the Constitution was ratified in 1857. And Diaz didn't take power until 1876, but he was sort of nominally kowtowing to the Constitution, but in reality he was just riding roughshod over it at any opportunity.
Yeah, like our Sultan.
Yeah, so different strokes for different folks, but they're more or less doing the same thing of saying that they're obeying the Constitution, but really they're not. And this upsets this chap, Francisco Maduro, and as soon as he hears that the presidential elections are open, he begins campaigning, and actually doing a pretty good job of campaigning. He sort of takes on the US way of campaigning, where he takes over some newspapers and plants articles that are pro him and anti-Diaz. He holds mass meetings and does a whistle-stop tour around Mexico on a train. So he's got all this paraphernalia of North American elections going on. And Diaz, who was initially complacent, he becomes rattled by this. And even though he describes it as a microbe's challenge to an elephant, he quickly realised that actually Maduro is onto something and could well win this 1910 election. So what do you think he does, Phil? What does Mr. Diaz, our president, do as soon as he's threatened?
Well, I'm gonna sort of think about it. By the standards of today, it's a dictatorship that's been long in power. He'll be surrounded by yes men. I believe the average age of Diaz's cabinet is 70. So I'm going to suggest that he probably doesn't deal well with the threat and throws Maduro in jail.
He does exactly that, yeah. He throws him in jail, conducts the election according to his usual principles of corruption and coercion, and of course he wins. He thinks that will be the end of that, but for whatever reason he releases Maduro, maybe thinking, well, you know, as I said, he's a microbes challenge to an elephant. He's not going to do anything. He underestimates Maduro, though, because Maduro flees to Texas, and from Texas he issues a call to all Mexicans to rise up against their government on November 20th, 1910. And this is what kicks off the whole revolution, a decade of fighting and bloodshed.
And back and forth.
And it starts off slowly, but soon snowballs. And revolutionaries are popping up in the northern state of Chihuahua, the southern states as well, these disaffected peasants particularly. As we said, the army, he'd sort of weakened that. It wasn't as strong as he thought it was, and he quickly realised that he was losing large parts of the country. Revolution is sweeping the country now. It's not just ragtag bands, it's actually organised bands of guerrilla fighters and revolutionaries, and they're putting Diaz's rusty military apparatus to shame. So Diaz's advisors, they convince him to resign, and off he goes to Paris, fleeing into exile in Paris. Our friend Francisco Maduro is inaugurated as president, and he even has an election. So it's sort of like the freest election Mexico has ever had up to this point, and they vote Maduro in. And he's campaigning on this sort of liberal, reformist platform. But their aim was not really to completely dramatically transform the old order as things. It was more just like a light revolution light. So some few moderate reforms. And yeah, what do you think is the result of this, like, revolution light? Are people going to be happy with that, or?
Well, as I understand, yeah, it just sort of kicks off back and forths of the two factions for the next 10 years. I suspect that our Francisco Maduro will get assassinated probably in about February of about around 1913, maybe about the 22nd.
Yep, exactly. So
full name, by the way, Francisco Ignacio Maduro Gonzalez.
So Francisco, as I will call him, or Mr. Maduro, he doesn't last that long. As you say, he meets a sticky end, like a lot of revolutionaries in this time, actually. He is...
And to this day, indeed.
He is counter-couped. Actually, it wasn't a coup, was it? He was technically elected. But anyway, a general called Huerta, a vicious alcoholic, a big fan of Diaz, and like a company man, if you will, for Porfirio Diaz. He comes in and overthrows Maduro in February 1913. Against Maduro's lack of progress in his liberal experiment. But yeah, he's overthrown, and Huerta implements this strict military regime. And this is the first time that we begin to see the United States hand involved in the Mexican Revolution as well.
Of course.
Because although Huerta organised a coup alongside other Diaz loyalists, it was under the prompting of the ambassador, a certain Henry Lane Wilson, the US ambassador, and he helped cook up the plot, really, to get rid of Maduro and replace him with Huerta.
And then it's just back and forth and to and fro. Is it Maduro who inspires Sancho Panza? Uh-oh. No.
Not Sancho Panza. Do you mean Pancho Villa? Sancho Panza, he's from
Don Quixote.
Talking with Windmills. Yeah, Don Quixote.
Is that
Don Pancho Villa.
No,
he was around for a while. Should we just go through that bit again?
Much that once was is lost. We are time trickling, for I can see what is to come. We are time trickling. Much that once was is lost. Go back, learn the lessons. It is the only way to avoid catastrophe.
By this point, the fabric of the old order has been sort of rent in two. You've got on one side the supporters of the old way of Diaz, the local bosses, the state oligarchs, the church, and some of the organs of the previous state. All of them have to surrender much of their power while Maduro's in charge. So Huerta's sort of bringing them back. But at the same time, you've got the more radical, revolutionary leaders who are also very strong at this time, who were dissatisfied with Maduro. But they're not just going to sit back and let this chap Huerta, the military guy, the rule with an iron fist sort of character, take charge of Mexico. And so you've got these popular leaders like
Pancho Villa and Emiliano
who
Zapata
are outraged that Huerta's taking control, and they do their very best to create as many problems for Huerta and his new regime as they can, and take their sort of armies, their supporters, and start creating a ruckus in the north, in the south, and Huerta doesn't really know what to do, because although he's got some power in the central areas in Mexico City, he's got no way of putting down these rebellious revolutionaries.
Pancho Villa, he's my fave. Does he become a bit of a folk hero almost? Our Pancho.
Yeah, Pancho Villa. I like Pancho Villa too. Do you know much about Pancho Villa? Got any little nuggets you want to tell us about him?
I was all prepped for the interview and a bit of Diaz, and then I sort of thought, I'll busk the rest.
Well, we've got a lot of revolutionaries to get through. It's a real hodgepodge of various characters.
Hang on, how many? Do we need all of them? Can we select the best two?
Yeah, let's have a look at Pancho Villa.
Yeah.
He's been around for a while in the revolutionary circles ever since 1910. He's fighting as a man of the people, very much wanting to pass power to the people, basically.
Oh yeah, that's what they all say. I've noticed every event, everyone. Oh,
he really
people
was.
This, people that, people sheeple weeple.
He was sort of referred to as a Mexican Robin Hood, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. A peasant son driven to banditry. He was a devoted follower of Maduro. When Maduro was gone, he was very much anti-Huerta. He was described as tall, robust, weighing about 180 pounds, with a complexion almost as florid as a German, wearing an English pith helmet, a heavy brown sweater, khaki leggings, and heavy riding shoes.
I was not expecting the end of that simile to be almost as florid as a German.
He's got a great moustache, as a lot of these revolutionaries do, and he's often seen with like bandoliers of bullets across him. So he really does quite a dashing revolutionary figure. He's always riding around on his horse and leading from the front. But yeah, as I said, he's been
horse.
He's been a bandit for a while. I think he first entered into banditry, his life on the run, when he was just 15 years old, because a man was harassing his sisters, and as you do if you're in the Mexican village, you just shot him dead. He was arrested, but he managed to escape imprisonment, and then just went banditing. And he'd got sort of little group of supporters during his bandit days, and then he realised that he could turn his banditry into like a way to consolidate power locally.
Am I right in saying that we've got a lot of sources for our Pancho were him later on in life, and starring as himself in Hollywood films and giving interviews to foreign journalists later on?
There was a film that was shot with him, a contemporary film.
His exclusion from the official narrative of the revolution might have contributed to his continued posthumous popular acclaim. He was celebrated during the revolution and long afterwards by corridos, films about his life, and novels by prominent writers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did certainly have a cult of personality built up around him.
And what I'm trying to say is it seems like a lot of, he also plumped himself up later on and maybe embroidered his tales a little.
Yeah, man of the people he was.
Oh,
he preferred popular pastimes, so he was always
peoply pastimes,
heading off to
just a peoply person, like all the other peoply persons.
He liked the odd bullfight or all-night dances.
Oh, fair.
He was a great womanizer. Well, he did avoid hard liquor.
What does womanizer?
But he would often arrive at the front with bloodshot eyes and an air of extreme lassitude.
Here's a question that might recur through the 20th century. What does womanizer mean? Does it mean someone who's horny all the time, or just are we talking sexual assault? I never really know with womanizer. Do you know what I mean?
It's hard to say, isn't it? We don't really tail people into the bedroom on our trips around history.
We would if we could fit the damn machine through the door.
I think it just means they father lots of children. They like the women. They like to. Well, they don't keep their hands to themselves. Let's put it that way.
Oh God.
He often travelled around in a railway car, a red caboose with chintz curtains and photographs of showy ladies and theatrical poses tacked on the walls.
Nice,
yes, indeed.
It's like
but yeah, he was, I think, a man of the people. He's sort of readily swapping jokes with the rank and file while he's riding along on his horse.
Yeah, he was the Mexican Robin Williams.
I'd prefer Robin Hood, but
the Mexican Robin Day.
Jokes up his sleeve. But to be fair to him, he always led from the front. In the battle, he was always at the thick of it, urging on his men rather than directing strategy from the rear.
Who needs strategy? Better that you get all your men killed.
So Diaz and Huerta, the champions of the old regime, they've been deposed. There's a power vacuum now, wherein the so-called constitutionalists step in, and they see the sort of ragtag peasant armies of the likes of Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata as a bit of a threat, and they gradually shut them down. As you said, he wasn't so successful from 1916 onwards. In fact, probably the one reason that really cooked his goose was when he decided, very controversially, to take the fight to America.
Oh, again, you did down having a strategist at the back, but they probably would have said, "Don't try and invade America." At this point, Pancho. But before you continue, I was going to say, do you know what Pancho's nickname was as a child?
I know one of his nicknames was La Cucaracha, the cockroach.
La cucaracha, the cockroach. Yeah.
I didn't know it was a childhood nickname, though. I assumed it was a wartime nickname because he was so difficult to crush.
I kind of just made up childhood. So yeah, what you said.
But yeah, as you said, Pancho's decision to invade America was probably not the best. And this wasn't the only naughty thing he did to Americans, because in January of 1916, he'd executed 17 US citizens in Mexico. And then 2 months later, he raids into a town called Columbus in New Mexico, killing another 17 Americans. Partly in an effort to demonstrate that his nemesis at this point, Carranza, did not have any control over northern Mexico, but also just because he was running out of guns and horses. The attack on Columbus was very, very silly, though, because he'd heard it just had 50 US troops, and he thought, yeah, I can ride in with a few hundred and overwhelm them. In fact, there were many, many more US troops well equipped there, and his raid was very ineffectual. He ended up shooting more horses than men, and he'd actually gotten to steal the horses, so that was a bit pointless. Was quickly chased in like a punitive expedition.
So he sounds like a bit of a he is a showman, really. He's not actually very competent at all.
I feel that you're not a great lover of Pancho Villa, more of a Diaz.
Just providing some BBC balance.
Benevolent old dictator rather than the young, dashing. Maybe not dashing, but...
No, I don't like Diaz. It wasn't me saying those things. I was reading the part of the journalist, James Creelman. It wasn't me, like, getting off on his angular, wise, old, jutting forehead. Did you think that was just me?
Flaring nostrils.
You thought that was just me talking about, the flaring nostrils. Oh, dearie me.
Unfortunately... As I said, like most revolutionary leaders at this time, he did die in a hail of bullets while driving a car in 1923. So the revolution had ended, but it caught up with him in the end. And at the age of 45, he was gunned down.
Seems like a pattern.
Yeah, well, it's not too dissimilar to what's going on in Mexico now, really.
Yeah.
Drug barons getting gunned down. So
doing the gunning down, really.
Although they weren't drug barons at this time, they were revolutionaries and power vacuums and a weak state. Zapata was the leader of peasants in the south, and he rose up to support Maduro and kept fighting for the rights of villagers. He was what's called a charro, so like a horse-loving, dandified countryman. Who wore a huge sombrero.
Yeah, that is a huge sombrero.
Even one of his most famous phrases you may have heard that he coined. Not many people know he coined it, but the phrase, it is better to live on your feet than die on your knees, was a Zapata phrase. It's often sort of attributed to either La Pasionara from the Spanish Civil War or Che Guevara. Sometimes I've heard it said. We got a complicated situation going on in Mexico. Years and years of conflict and back and forth, and different leaders of various factions having their time in the sun and then fading in and fading out, getting assassinated. But yeah, over the years, these popular movements led by the likes of Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata, they gradually lose their impetus.
Well, I've got a little bit of news for you. The phrase, better that we should die on our feet rather than live on our knees, was spoken by François Noël Gracchus Babeuf in his defense of the conspiracy of equals in April 1797. In French, it read, Ne vaut-il pas mieux importer le color une fois passif sur la servitude? So there you go. Thanks Susie Dent here in Dictionary Corner. It was the robot, really.
It was a great French accent. I was almost transported away from Mexico for a moment to the salons of France.
Yeah.
I think it's a fairly common turn of phrase.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, you said it was Zapata, I'm just saying,
I
he's
think
perhaps
it was
not as
Zapata.
original as he's like the J.K. Rowling of his
I don't think
day
he would
and
have.
genre.
He would have, being sort of a semi-literate peasant, he probably wouldn't have heard of Frenchie McGee and his sort of roundabout way of saying it. I think Zapata said it in a much more concise, punchy manner.
Point was, it's a phrase that's already in sort of circulation. So whether he's heard it or read it or not, he didn't make it up. That's all I'm saying. It's like, he didn't make it up.
I think you're doing him a great disservice. I think he was actually almost like the epitome of this, refusing to back down. He probably coined it himself. I don't think he had any.
Okay, well, how about
any frame of reference to him?
One bit. Aeschylus said, "For it would be better to die once and for all than to suffer pain for all one's life." Oh, sorry, that's irrelevant. Carry on. Sorry, Johnny. I got a little bit wordled up, and I'm reading very small print.
Yes, it's in the small print section, definitely the disclaimer section of whether Zapata said it or not. For our narrative's sake, I'm going to say he was saying it, and if not saying it,
and he did say it. He did
certainly
say
embodying it.
Yeah, he said it. He just didn't make it up. That's all I'm saying. I mean, it's also often misattributed to George Washington as well as to Che Guevara.
It's one of those phrases that anyone can almost be shoehorned into. But I think if we had to pick one, we can both agree that Zapata would be the one who deserves it most.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. When are we going back to the garage?
You definitely got distracted by the minutiae of who coined the revolutionary phrase.
They live for it.
We're going back now because we've been really jumping around.
Yeah. Right, let's get in it. Have you got your item?
Yep.
Oh, I wonder what item you've got. What item will Johnny have brought back? We'll see. Right, let's go. Oh, I enjoyed that, Johnny. It started with a sort of CNN-style interview that you might have with Bashir al-Assad. Must be one of the first big sort of dictator interviews. And I think James Creelman was a bit soft on President Diaz.
Yeah, I'd say it was a bit hard for President Diaz.
I like that. We should just end it there. Goodbye.
What did you bring back, Phil, from the Mexican Revolution?
Well, I'm going to have to ask you to go first, if you don't mind, Johnny.
Well, as you can see, I've got this lovely big sombrero that I borrowed from my man Emiliano Zapata. It's going to keep me shady. No sun will penetrate this brim.
You look pretty shady. I suppose that's going in the garage with all the other, with the horse and the this and the mosquito.
Yeah, I'll take it with me to the beach. But yeah, most of the time I'm just going to hang it up here over your bed.
Well, I have a lovely little item. I've got here in this little bottle tears from the eyes of President Diaz. I collected them during the interview. If you recall, James Creelman said there were actually tears in the veteran's eyes, so I extracted them into this little bottle.
Yeah, crocodile tears, I think.
Look at that. Well, yeah, I think you're right. Either way, they'll fetch a few bob on eBob. Look at that. We've done 10 years event by event. We've got 20 items around in this garage. Amazing.
It's quite impressive, isn't it? It's getting cluttered, but yeah, we've still got another 9 decades to go.
Exactly.
So be sure to tune in a few weeks' time when we pick up the second decade of the 20th century and pick that to pieces.
Yeah.
Like, follow, subscribe, biddy 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 biddy.
Mexico, Roosevelt, Geronimo, light the fuse and watch it blow.